Rain hammered the hotel awning as the charity gala glittered like nothing could rot beneath it. Ethan Cole said, "You bought a halo with my family's blood." He slipped past the velvet rope and reached the AV rack. Vivian Hart raised a champagne flute and smiled for flashes. Maya Brooks said, "We have one shot, make it clean." The projector stuttered, then the feed cut from slides to hidden footage. Vivian pressed her lips thin as Trent Hale turned from the bar. Ethan said, "Watch who paid to frame Lucas." The ballroom gasped when the transfer receipt filled the screen. Vivian said, "Security, handle this nuisance." Ethan felt the room tilt, but he stood his ground. Maya said, "Let it play." The audio bled out a figure naming Vivian and the payoff. Ethan said, "You lied and called it justice." Her smile shattered, neat as glass. The storm followed them into the parking deck, humming through concrete ribs like a warning. Ethan said, "She will bury this by morning." Maya said, "Then we make morning come now." He leaned on the cold rail and watched the city smear. The clip still shook his hands, but resolve was harder than fear. Ethan said, "Lucas begged me to stop digging, and I did." Maya said, "You stopped because you were alone." Sirens braided the night beyond the ramp. Ethan said, "This time, I don't blink." She offered a burner phone and a plan. Maya said, "Upload at dawn, send files to 3 outlets, and a lawyer." Ethan nodded and felt the weight shift from his chest to his spine. By sunrise, Vivian's office smelled like steel and citrus, efficient as a blade. Vivian said, "We neutralize the edit, then the boy." Trent said, "Name it, and I close it." She paced between glass walls, where the skyline looked obedient. Vivian said, "Float a statement, discredit an unstable sibling, seed doubt." Trent watched her reflection and measured threats against time. Vivian said, "Find a leak at the gala." He said, "The girl with the phone?" She sipped black coffee that never sweetened. Vivian said, "Fear travels faster than truth." The city brightened, and her smile returned like armor. The diner clock ticked loud enough to count regrets. Gabriel Stone said, "You just made noise in a very quiet empire." Ethan weighed the stranger's voice and the scar that cut his calm. Gabriel said, "I once chased a lie and lost more than proof." Steam curled from cheap coffee like a confession. Ethan said, "You know Vivian." Gabriel said, "I know the people who built her and what they hide." A semi growled past and shook the sugar caddy. Gabriel slid a plain key card across the formica. He said, "Storage unit, start there." Ethan said, "Why help me?" Gabriel said, "Because I remember being you." The storage hallway smelled like dust and old plans. Ethan said, "If this is another dead end, I still walk it." The unit door rolled up with a cough. Inside, boxes sat labeled in a precise, unfriendly hand. He cut tape and found ledgers, burner phones, and a lacquered folder. Ethan said, "Contracts and cover stories." A photograph slid free, Vivian shaking hands with a judge in quiet smiles. He felt anger cool into purpose. Ethan said, "This is how she built the lie." Footsteps echoed somewhere beyond, then stopped. He turned off the light and listened to the dark breathe back. The unit's air still clung to Ethan as dawn cracked the skyline. Ethan said, "She hoards truth like treasure, locked in boxes." He flipped through papers until his chest burned. Maya said, "Then we cut her vault wide open." Her eyes carried more resolve than fear. Ethan pressed a folder against the railing and watched the city shimmer like broken glass. He said, "Lucas's trial was a stage show, and she wrote the script." Maya said, "We'll flip her story page by page." The morning rush stirred below, unaware of the quiet war above. Ethan said, "This time we make sure the lies die louder than they live." The old library smelled of dust and varnish, hiding secrets in plain sight. Gabriel Stone said, "Evidence without precision is noise." Ethan studied the scarred man's steady eyes. Gabriel said, Vivian thrives when her enemies get reckless. Ethan said, so I walk carefully but strike hard. The wooden shelves whispered with every draft, like voices from another time. Gabriel set down a manila envelope. He said, inside are names she can't afford to see daylight. Ethan flipped it open, lips tightening at the roster. Gabriel said, every one of them is a thread. Pull it right, and she unravels. The corner cafe buzzed with morning chatter, but tension built between the cups. Maya said, this is too much, Ethan. You're pushing yourself to the edge. Ethan stirred untouched coffee, staring at the surface. Ethan said, if I don't push, she wins again. A child's laughter cut through the room like an echo from another life. Maya said, Lucas would hate what you're becoming. He tightened his grip on the spoon. Ethan said, Lucas begged for truth, not silence. Maya sighed and brushed her sleeve across the table. She said, I'll follow you, but I won't let you drown. Vivian's mansion shimmered with sterile wealth, marble floors polished to erase flaws. Vivian said, they think they can bleed me with whispers. She traced the rim of her glass. Trent Hale leaned near the fireplace, arms crossed. Trent said, noise spreads faster than fire. Vivian said, so we smother both before they spread. She clicked a file closed on her laptop, eyes sharp. Vivian said, Maya Brooks is the key. Destroy her first. Trent cracked his knuckles, a predator with no leash. Vivian smiled, as if rehearsed for mirrors. Vivian said, the boy thinks he's clever. We'll make him bleed for cleverness. Night bled into alleys, slick with rain, as Ethan and Maya traced shadows. Ethan said, she's tightening her circle. We're running out of time. Maya lifted her phone, screen reflecting names from Gabriel's list. Maya said, one wrong step and we're a dead weight. A police siren wailed faint in distance, red light skimming across brick. Ethan said, then no wrong steps. He pressed a photograph flat against the wall, a judge and Vivian smiling in quiet pact. Ethan said, we use this first. It cuts deepest. Maya said, then we hit harder than they expect. Their reflections blurred in the wet pavement. The courthouse basement smelled of damp stone and mildew. A mausoleum for justice gone wrong. Ethan said, Lucas stood here cornered and silenced. He ran his fingers along dusty boxes stacked like coffins. Maya said, she buried him beneath paper, smothered his voice with procedure. Ethan ripped a seal, brittle paper crumbling in his hands. He said, chain of custody records, doctored, dates rewritten. The humming light flickered as if nervous to stay alive. Maya leaned close, eyes sharp. Maya said, she didn't just cheat the trial, she rewrote reality. Ethan pressed the envelope flat against his chest. He said, if this sees daylight, her empire fractures like glass under fire. The alley reeked of rain, rot, and cigarettes. Trent Hale slammed a man against brick, muscles coiled like rope. Trent said, talk, or I paint the wall red. Ethan whispered from across the street, her dog hunts loose ends. Maya crouched low, heart thundering in her ears. Maya said, if he looks up, we vanish for good. The victim whimpered, blood seeping from his lip. Trent cracked his collarbone with brutal indifference. Trent said, name the leak now. The man gasped, pointing down the block. Ethan tugged Maya's sleeve, pulling her deeper into shadow. Ethan said, we move before he catches the scent. The sound of bones breaking followed them into the dark. The apartment was a shrine of absence, blinds broken, dust thick on forgotten frames. Ethan picked up a cracked photo of Lucas before betrayal carved his life hollow. Ethan said, she didn't just accuse him, she erased him. Maya brushed a finger across an eviction notice, brittle and unopened. Maya said, his home turned into a coffin without a body. A mug still sat by the sink, fossilized rings circling the bottom. Ethan clenched the frame tight. Ethan said, this was his refuge, turned into evidence of ruin. Silence draped the room like a shroud. Maya said, if we carry his truth, She'll never silence him again. Ethan closed his eyes, grief hardening into rage. The river carried secrets, black water shimmering under city neon. Gabriel lit a cigarette, scars deepened by orange glow. Gabriel said, I hunted lies until nothing remained but my ruin. Ethan said, so you want me to drop it? Gabriel shook his head, smoke curling like confession. Gabriel said, no. I want you to walk in eyes open. Rage blinds quicker than it fuels. Maya shifted on the bank, her reflection shaking in the current. Maya said, he's warning us because he knows the cost. Ethan's jaw tightened, stubbornness shining. Ethan said, if I stop, she wins. Gabriel flicked ash into the river. Gabriel said, if you burn too bright, you leave nothing but smoke. The loft walls pulsed with red thread like veins of obsession. Ethan pinned another photo, Vivian clasping hands with a judge in secret smiles. Ethan said, this is the core of her empire. Maya said, every string leads back to her. The desk lamp buzzed, casting maps and faces into an amber web. Ethan dragged a line of thread, hands steady, rage focused. Gabriel leaned in the doorway, shadows softening the fatigue in his eyes. Gabriel said, cut wrong, and the web strangles you. Ethan turned, face lit sharp. Dot. Ethan said, we don't pull threads, we slice. Maya moved closer, fists clenched. Maya said, then we carve until she has nowhere left to hide. The press room buzzed like a hive, cameras flashing, voices sharp with hunger. Vivian said, justice must prevail, even when liars try to drown truth. She smiled as microphones crowded closer. Ethan and Maya watched from the far back, their shoulders tight. Ethan whispered, she builds a new lie while the old one still breathes. Maya said, and the world swallows it whole. A journalist asked about the leaked files. Vivian dismissed it with a shake of her head. Vivian said, desperate noise from broken people. The crowd laughed politely. Ethan's fists clenched, nails biting into his palms. He said, she doesn't defend herself, she dances on Lucas's grave. The library's hidden archive groaned under its own weight. Gabriel pushed a ladder, muttering. Gabriel said, she's rewritten her past, but cracks remain. Ethan sifted through a crumbling journal. Ethan said, her father bought silence with signatures. The paper felt older than dust, names etched like scars. Maya said, legacies rot the same way people do. A gust rattled loose pages, scattering them across the floor. Ethan bent low, collecting them carefully. Ethan said, this proves her empire was forged in fraud. Gabriel lit a lamp, eyes cold. Gabriel said, evidence is power, but power without caution is suicide. Night fell over a bridge lined with rusted rails. Maya said, this is reckless. She's tightening her grip. Ethan stood against the railing, city glow in his eyes. Ethan said, every lie she spreads, every threat she sends, it only fuels me more. A police siren wailed faintly below, fading into the river noise. Maya touched his arm. Maya said, I'm not afraid of her, Ethan. I'm afraid of you becoming her. He looked away, throat tight. Ethan said, if vengeance makes me her shadow, then so be it. Maya whispered, Lucas wouldn't want this. Ethan said, Lucas doesn't get a choice anymore. Trent's footsteps echoed in the warehouse, shadows long under broken skylights. Trent said, Vivian doesn't pay me to ask questions. She pays me to end them. He cracked his knuckles, pacing slow. Ethan hid behind crates, sweat prickling his neck. Maya whispered, he'll find us, Ethan. He smells blood. Trent kicked a metal drum, sound clanging like a warning. Ethan clutched the evidence folder tighter. Ethan said, he's her hammer. We're the nail. Trent growled, come out, boy. End this chase. Silence stretched. Maya pressed her back against Ethan's. Maya said, we can't fight him, only outlast him. The loft walls felt closer than ever, every thread on the corkboard vibrating with tension. Ethan slammed a photo down. Ethan said, She's poisoning the city, and they cheer for her lies. Gabriel said, every tyrant looks invincible until the blade finds them. Maya shook her head. Maya said, this path is carving you hollow. Ethan's eyes burned as he dragged red string from Vivian's photo to the judge's name. Ethan said, if I fall cutting. Gabriel stepped forward, placing a heavy hand on his shoulder. Gabriel said, choose how you fall. Revenge will not choose for you. The silence after was sharper than any blade. The safe house smelled of old coffee and secrets. And don't come disorder young. Gabriel slid a worn folder across the table, his hand trembling. Gabriel said, this is the truth I never wanted you to see. Ethan flipped it open, eyes narrowing at photographs of Vivian beside Gabriel in younger days. Ethan said, you were part of her world. Gabriel's face hardened, scar deepening. Gabriel said, once, before I knew what she was capable of. Maya's jaw dropped, her eyes bouncing between them. Maya said, you helped build the monster we're fighting. Silence pressed heavy. Gabriel said, I betrayed her long before you were dragged into this. But the blood on her hands began with my silence. Ethan's rage cracked into disbelief. The loft's corkboard became a battlefield of revelations. Ethan pinned photos of Gabriel and Vivian together, red thread linking their faces. Ethan said, you lied to me. Gabriel said, I withheld what would shatter you before you were ready. Maya stepped forward, fire in her voice. Maya said, ready. He deserved the truth the moment you knew it. Gabriel sighed, shoulders heavy. Gabriel said, I thought protecting him meant sparing him. Ethan's fists pounded the table. Ethan said, you were her ally once, and now you call yourself my guide. The lamp flickered, shadows slicing across their faces. The silence was broken only by Ethan's ragged breath. Vivian's private office glowed with cold elegance, marble and glass, sharp as knives. She leaned back in her chair, watching a hidden video feed of Ethan shouting in the loft. Vivian said, even his mentor cracks. Perfect. Trent stood nearby, arms folded like stone. Trent said, you want me to cut the old man out? Vivian's smile curved like venom. Vivian said, no, let the boy see the betrayal bleed him dry. She swirled wine in a crystal glass, her reflection fractured in its curves. Vivian said, every step they take brings them closer to my stage, and on that stage, I write the ending. Trent's silence was darker than agreement. In the safe house, Maya cornered Gabriel, her voice raw. Maya said, how many lies have you buried? Gabriel's shoulders sank under weight of memory. Gabriel said, too many. Enough to make me her mirror. Ethan paced the room, fury eating his silence. Ethan said, you let Lucas fall. You let my family burn. Gabriel's voice cracked. Gabriel said, I thought sacrifice would shield the future. Maya snapped. Sacrifice? You chose survival. Ethan's eyes burned, throat tight. Ethan said, every secret you kept chained me closer to her game. Gabriel said, then break the chain now. Expose both of us if you must. The confession left the air trembling. The rooftop wind whipped their words away, but the truth clung heavier than air. Ethan faced the skyline, folder in hand. Ethan said, Vivian is poison, but you, he pointed at Gabriel, you fed her roots. Gabriel didn't flinch. Gabriel said, and now I stand ready to tear them up beside you. Maya's voice cut through. Maya said, trust is ash, but ash still fuels fire. Ethan closed his eyes, chest heaving, then opened the folder. Inside, signatures tied Vivian to judges, police, and Gabriel's past dealings. Ethan said, this is the nail for her coffin, but it may bury you too. The city glowed, waiting for war. The loft became a war room. Ethan marked circles over Vivian's allies on the map, his pen stabbing paper like a blade. Ethan said, we strike tonight. Maya stood behind him, voice low but steady. Maya said, every step brings you closer to breaking. Gabriel leaned against the door, shadows heavy on his scar. Gabriel said, "If you step into her arena, you'd better own it." Ethan's chest heaved, folder clutched tight. Ethan said, "I don't want survival. I want justice carved into her lies." Silence filled the air, buzzing like a storm waiting to break. The parking lot's sodium lights buzzed as Trent waited by a black SUV, smoke curling from his lips. Trent said, "She wants blood. Yours if you're stubborn, hers if you're lucky." Ethan stepped forward from shadow, eyes locked. Ethan said, "She sends a soldier instead of facing me." Trent crushed the cigarette beneath his boot. Trent said, "I don't ask why. I break what I'm told to break." Maya whispered behind Ethan, "He's testing you." The night air chilled, silence stretching like a rope about to snap. Ethan said, "Then let's see what breaks first, me or your loyalty." Vivian's mansion glowed like a fortress, every window a watchful eye. Inside, she scrolled news feeds of leaks, spreading. Vivian said, "He thinks he's winning. Let him." She touched the screen showing Ethan's image, lips curling. Vivian said, "Pride makes men sloppy." A crystal decanter clinked as she poured wine. Trent entered silently, his face unreadable. Vivian said, "Report." He said nothing, only meeting her gaze. For the first time, a flicker of unease shadowed her eyes. Vivian whispered, "Don't tell me loyalty falters now." Silence hung heavier than any words. By the river docks, fog wrapped the night in secrets. Gabriel handed Ethan a USB drive, his voice low. Gabriel said, "Everything. Transactions, judges, bribes. It burns her whole kingdom." Ethan stared at the small device as if it weighed tons. Ethan said, "Proof is power, but power kills if misused." Maya stepped closer, her voice urgent. Maya said, "Then use it right. End her, but don't become her." Gabriel's hand lingered on Ethan's shoulder. Gabriel said, "Choose wisely. My sins already live in her shadow. Don't let yours join them." Ethan clenched the drive, eyes burning like fire in the fog. The abandoned theater loomed, velvet curtains shredded, dust hanging like smoke. Ethan stepped onto the stage, projector light burning his face. Ethan said, "This is where the mask falls." Vivian's voice rang from the darkness. Vivian said, "Or where the fool is unmasked." Maya gripped his arm tight, whispering. Maya said, "She's baited you here." Ethan's voice hardened. Ethan said, "Then I'll flip the stage on her." Footsteps echoed as Vivian emerged, flawless and venomous. Vivian said, "Welcome to the end, Ethan." He stood tall, folder in hand, storm in his eyes. The abandoned theater groaned like a graveyard of applause. Ethan stood center stage, folder raised high under the projector's glare. Ethan said, "This is your reckoning, Vivian." From the shadows, she stepped forward, heels sharp against cracked wood. Vivian said, "Reckoning? You mistake obsession for justice." Maya's grip on Ethan's arm tightened, her whisper a plea. Maya said, "Don't let her twist you." Vivian laughed, glassy and cold. Vivian said, "You've become the liar you hate." Ethan's pulse pounded as he held the USB drive aloft. Ethan said, "No more lies. Only the truth bleeding into light." The screen blazed with documents, bank transfers, bribes, photographs linking Vivian to corruption. The crowd of invited journalists gasped, their cameras flashing like gunfire. Vivian's mask slipped, her smile breaking under the weight of proof. Vivian said, "Fabrications? Lies?" Ethan's voice cracked with rage. Ethan said, "These are your words, your payments, your empire of deceit." Maya whispered, "It's working. She's unraveling." Vivian lunged forward, snatching at the folder, but Ethan stepped back. Ethan said, "No more stolen lives." The room swelled with murmurs, the tide turning. For the first time, Vivian's eyes flashed with true fear. Trent's heavy boots echoed as he strode onto the stage, eyes fixed on Vivian. She snapped, "Stop them! End this!" But he stood still, chest heaving, fists unclenched. Trent said, "I served your lies long enough." Vivian's face twisted. Vivian said, "You owe me loyalty." He shook his head, stepping between her and Ethan. Trent said, "Not anymore." The audience buzzed with shock, cameras capturing Betrayal live. Ethan's breath caught, seeing his enemy become an unexpected shield. Vivian's voice cracked, shrill. Vivian said, "You'll regret this." Trent's glare burned. Trent said, "I already regret all of it." The tension cracked like thunder. Vivian screamed, clawing at the evidence, but Trent restrained her. Ethan said, "This is the truth, live and undeniable." Cameras rolled as Gabriel appeared in the aisle, eyes shadowed with regret. Gabriel said, "I built her rise and I confess it now." The journalists gasped louder. Ethan turned, stunned. Ethan said, "You damn yourself to finish this." Gabriel nodded, voice steady. Gabriel said, "Redemption costs everything." Vivian thrashed, shrieking. Vivian said, "You'll all burn." Gabriel raised his scarred hand. Gabriel said, "No, only the guilty." Silence thundered in the theater as her downfall sealed. The theater emptied, silence falling like ashes after fire. Vivian was dragged out, her voice still echoing curses that no one believed. Trent leaned against the stage wall, hollow but free. Maya slipped her hand into Ethan's, eyes soft. Maya said, "It's over." Ethan shook his head slowly, staring at the shattered projector light. Ethan said, "It's never over, but the truth is louder now." Gabriel stood in the back, a shadow against the exit, scar etched in sorrow. Gabriel said, "Remember, victory leaves scars too." Ethan closed the folder for the last time. Ethan whispered, "Lucas, you can rest."